Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another stock market outlook video as well as weekly watch list video. Today I'm kind of doing them combined just to save a little bit of time. As always, we're going to run through a few of the major indexes. Then I'll go through kind of my wider list for this upcoming trading week and talk through all these different chart patterns, stocks that are setting up, as well as just some existing leaders at this point. This video is brought to you by DeepView, which is the charting and screening platform that I'm using live in this video. And if you want more information about it, definitely go ahead and check out the link popping up right now, as well as located down in the description, or just go to deepview.com. With that said, let's go ahead and start with the QQQ, which is the stock on the screen right now. Positives are that it's forming higher lows here. Nice action versus the 200-day moving average. Very strong rally into the end of last week. A little bit short-term extended. We've got 4 days of strong up moves here. A little bit of hesitation here on Friday. But, it just looks like it's forming a base below this level after a prior uptrend. The SPY, however, is a little bit weaker. You've got a potential bear flag forming. It's right up against this 200-day moving average. Not a great day on this past Friday. It was rejected at that 200-day, but it is just an inside day here, completely inside Thursday's candle. The QQQ is a little bit stronger because the mega cap, especially tech stocks, have been super strong. Apple, Google, Microsoft, all those are extremely strong, while a lot of the rest of the market has been a little bit weak, especially given the weakness in the banks, which is bringing down the SPY a little bit, as well as especially the IWM. The regional banks have really taken a hit. You can see that this is even weaker than the SPY. So a little bit of mixed signals in terms of the major indexes. The QQQ looks healthy. The SPY and IWM look a little bit weaker below their moving averages. And I think next week, especially with the Fed and some other news events, we could see, a little bit more clarity. We'll have to see whether we, stick this uptrend or, continue lower, break these lows. But the SPY is still forming higher lows as of this point. IWM, as I said, is right on the edge here, right at this level. So we'll have to see what happens in the coming weeks. We don't have to predict. All we have to do is react to what's actually going on in the market. In terms of leadership, semiconductors are still the clear number one group as far as I see. Packaged software still acting pretty well, but there have been some leaders that have taken hits and have kind of fallen off with their charts. So we'll have to wait and see as well. So moving on, let's talk about my wider list here. And you can see we'll start with Airbnb. It has declined since this earnings gap up on nice volume, pull back to the 50-day, undercutting this pivot. And that's really the level I'm watching right now to see if we can push back through it. It does have really great growth in terms of earnings and sales. If you look down at the bottom of the page here, and we'll have to see whether this can form out a base. Maybe this is the left-hand side and it needs a few more weeks to build out, but I just want to keep this on my radar. AHR, a nice pivot forming here. Big shakeout here on large volume, but I like how it closed strong. It's holding in there as well and forming out a base after a very strong run up. And we'll have to see what happens with this name. ALGM, nice flat action here. A little bit of a failed breakout here, as well as maybe here on this Friday. But it's holding that 21 EMA and has been in a very strong uptrend. And this is the leading group of the market, semiconductors. ANET, not really viable here. Extended, but nice action breaking out of this longer term base. And just looking at the volume profile, you can see there's no real sellers over this past, few months here. And it's holding that 21 EMA really nicely. So eventually this will pull back to the 21 EMA and even the 50-day. And maybe that's a spot where you can manage risk against and take a shot at this leader. Arlo, definitely a smaller cap name, so keep that in mind, but powerful off the bottom here, large volume. And you could watch this topside pivot or even a pullback to this prior area right here. I'd like to see this hold the HVC on any pullbacks and just see volume continue to decline and then push up on large volume. Axon also at a key kind of longer term level. If you look back all the way to 2021, and it's right at that spot holding the 21 EMA from a little bit of a tight range these past 5 days. And it's right at that longer term level. So I'm watching for a push up on higher volume and eventually a resumption of all-time highs. Duolingo, really nice action, earnings gap, large volume coming in here, average volume increasing, nice push up above this longer term level that has been forming as it tries to move up the right-hand side of the institutional due diligence phase. And you can watch this topside pivot as well as this lower pivot. I love to see it base out for a few more weeks, kind of, consolidate a little bit and then break out on large volume. And overall, I'd love to see, tightness in the base as well as volume declining if it does continue to consolidate. ELF, nice action after this earnings gap up, holding well. You can see a pullback right to that HVC on this day. reclaim that 21 EMA, and now it's forming a little bit of a pivot right at that 74.50 level. And we'll have to see whether, it can push higher here if the market is favorable, or does it, break this 21 EMA and just need a little bit more time. FOUR could definitely firm up a little bit, but it's also at a longer term level here. This key spot, this resistance level within the longer term base, and definitely a little bit choppy, but nice push up here on volume, some fall through, pullback, and tightness, or tightening against that 21 EMA. I'd love to see, a little bit more. You've got, some wicks up here where it was rejected down from, some downside reversals too. So I'd like to see, a nice inside day, then a push higher on an increase in volume, but you do see that volume is lower during this kind of choppiness right at this level. FSLR pulling back into the HVC as well as 21 EMA confluence. You've got a downward trend line here that you could potentially, push through and be actionable through that line. And we'll have to see what happens. Nice volume surge as it pushed up here. And I love, one inside day before it goes, but we'll have to see what happens. A lot of these, I think, are just kind of dependent on what the market is going to do. And that is definitely dependent on volatility given the market events. We've got the Fed announcement on Wednesday, which will definitely be a factor. FTNT moving on, forming a little bit of a consolidation after a gap up as it tries to bottom here. And, nice action. You've also got PanW in this group that's acting pretty well. Crowd's a little bit weaker, but, this is a decent looking base here. Upside reversal, a little bit undercut and rally action, reclaiming that 21 EMA. Downside reversal on Friday, just a little bit, but, not too bad, hanging in there. And that spot, that pivot, I think is still actionable on strength, except for the market conditions. GFS, a little bit choppier name, but also right near that pivot. You've got some downside reversals. It's definitely a tough one to buy on strength. You can see it's very choppy and likes to, reverse hard. So definitely move up your stops quick, but maybe an undercut rally of that 21 EMA, or, if it pulls back to the 62.45 level, you can see how that's been support previously, which would also line up with the basically 50-day moving average. But that is probably if the market does decide to pull in one more time. And you definitely want to see a pullback on lighter volume and a drift lower versus a sudden drop to that spot. Hubs, another name that's moving off the bottom here. Nice volume coming in, nice push higher, holding that 21 EMA for the most part. You've got a little bit of a pivot forming these past 2 days. Really nice inside day on basically no volume at all. This could be the lowest in quite some time, and we'll have to see whether it can push higher on larger volume. ND, this is a semiconductor moving out the right hand side of its institutional due diligence phase. Really strong action up here. Average volume is increasing. And this is a little bit of a stubby base. I'd like to see maybe a longer term flat base form here under 11, but we'll have to see what happens. And it is forming a nice tightness contraction here right under 10.5. INTA, another one with the kind of short stubby base, pull back to that 21 EMA. And this is again at a really nice key spot, these IPO advance highs here. And, it's basically ridden that 21 EMA to higher prices throughout this longer term uptrend. And, it kind of deserves a longer term base at this point. So I wouldn't be mad if it kind of pulls into the 50 SMA and, takes a few weeks off and consolidates. And then I'd definitely be watching it closely to basically have another base breakout. IoT, you've got a nice breakout on earnings. It's pulled back towards that 21 EMA area. This is kind of the HVC right near 19.51. Let's take a look. It's actually 19.48 is the HVC. Consolidation day for the most part this Friday. And I'll be watching for a push higher off this kind of range that's forming down here versus that HVC area. Maxon, just kind of watching this one, not super actionable. You do have a potential reclaim of that pivot if it does decide to do that. It's right at that 21 EMA, so I'd love to see support come in here and push it higher. You've got a sharp downward trend line. I wouldn't really trade that because it's so sharp, but we'll have to see what happens. Ideally, this kind of just bases out for a few more weeks, but we'll have to see what happens. Moving on, we've got Melly, another name that's moving off the bottom here. Nice volume coming in, a little bit of a short-term range forming here on the right-hand side. The pivot there is around 12.15. Nice inside day on Thursday. Lower volume over the past few days, and we'll have to see what happens. I really like this push higher and reclaim of those moving averages. Is holding that 50 SMA as it forms out this consolidation. Onan has earnings. Let's take a look when that is. That's after, or actually before the open on March 21st, and definitely double check the actual website for that. But I like the feature in deep view that shows that. when an earnings report is coming up. You can see that's also for AHR, and red just basically means that, you know, the earnings report is coming closer, while gray is a little bit further off in the distance. Taking a look at the chart, you got a nice push up here, you know, steady decline here below the moving averages, reclaiming that recently on Thursday and Friday. And we'll just have to wait and see what earnings brings. It could basically break either way, to the upside or to the downside. Moving on to PanW, this is acting well along with FT and T. And you can see you've got a subtle, you know, undercut and rally here off the 21 EMA, decent action on this day right here, and consolidation day here on Friday. PD, you know, maybe not super ready, but nice push on volume inside day on this Friday. It's straight off the bottom, you know, during this base, so I wouldn't mind, you know, one more week of sideways action consolidation, but it's acting decent at this moment. PEN, you know, nice trend here above the 21 EMA, forming out a base here. And I like the volume spikes coming here off the bottom. And yeah, just seeing basically how it can form up after this base and see if we can have a breakout on large volume. Pod forming a little bit of a range here over the past 4 days after moving up, I believe, on earnings. Nice volume coming in, I believe, is actually added to an index as well, which definitely contributed. And we'll have to see whether it can push here and kind of, you know, change character a little bit, because this definitely is a choppier mover. Spotify moving up, pulling into that 21 EMA, tightening a little bit here. I've got a pivot drawn at around 128. These highs are about 131 inside day on Friday, so we'll have to see what happens. Nice decline in volume during this inside day. And lastly, we've got Squarespace, which has already technically broken out through the HVC, but I wouldn't mind, you know, one more pull in here, tightness, and then a push higher, let that 21 EMA catch up a little bit, and then continue to move up off the bottom right here, but nice push on volume. So those are, you know, a few names worth watching and having on your watch list. We'll have to see what happens with the market next week. Let me know your thoughts on these names. Which are your favorite? Which do you think I should take a look at? Let me know down below in the comments. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, go ahead and leave a like down below. Subscribe if you're new to the channel, and I'll see you guys in future videos. Take care.